Willkommen, bienvenue. The stalwarts of the Cladding Matters crew are here. Not in no particular order. Hamish McLay of Search Convey, Wendy Gibson of the First Time Buyers Club, you may have recognised her from before, Silas Lees doing sterling work, and of course, Steve Day, the founder of buildingsafetyscheme.org, a current resident in Royal Artillery, I can't even say it, Royal Artillery Quays, I should have practiced, and fighting against a certain builder whose name shan't be mentioned and starts with B and ends with Arrots. And at the moment, what we're doing at the moment, we're talking about all aspects of cladding, and particularly whether or not, in today's question, is should the fire brigade be ignored in order to protect those builders? Hamish, should the fire brigade be ignored?
Well, I think it's. I guess we're in a situation here. It's a matter of opinion. It depends who you are. I should say, 2 days running, this is a totally different jacket to the one I wore yesterday. And I bought this myself as well. I didn't have a sponsor to buy my jacket for me. This is mine.
I should say that both IPSA, sorry, I've got the wrong bloody thing. There we go. Both IPSA, Kind of Magic, and Cladding Matters are now sponsored by Hamish McLay's jacket.
What could be better? What could be better? We have this strange thing, though. And it came tonight, again, because something that Steve had mentioned, or some information which actually came through. And the follow-up was that many of these precautions that are meant to be set up to protect residents, which we know haven't been set up, they certainly had no intention whatsoever of protecting firemen. Now, of course, in a situation that arises, and hopefully there's so few of them, but sadly, what have we had this last month? We've had three fires in London this last month, and in fairness to that, what was fortunate, there were some people who were not within the building when the fire started. Nobody was injured but however, as a consequence of the fire, we have residents who actually had to leave the building. They still have not returned, and nothing's been said about it. The government is not saying anything about it. The builders are saying nothing about it. Those poor souls are stuck outside of the building, and we've still got this ongoing sort of situation where the fire brigade is suggesting one particular aspect about safety measures, and the builders, who in fact are purely builders who should be building to a particular standard, who haven't built to that particular standard, are saying, no, it doesn't matter. Ignore the fire brigade. The fire brigade don't know about fire protection because we know better. And sadly, it would appear, well, we've got to get to the bottom of this. It would appear that always within what is being actually sort of said by the Deputy Prime Minister, that it's perfectly all right to have these fire risk sort of types of materials about you in blocks of flats.
But I thought that, Hamish, all houses are flammable to a certain extent. Surely it's okay, isn't it?
It's what you do to protect that fire from developing that's important. And this is the seriousness of what we have in the flats. Our future depends, the future build that Labour government are all about depends upon the number of flats they're going to be building. It is going to be a massive contribution to the 1.5 million that they aren't going to, they say they're going to build over this next 5 years. The planning permissions haven't actually yet been granted for them. And accordingly, yesterday, it takes an awfully long time. And as we know from what we hear from what Steve is saying too, these matters, which are serious issues, which aren't just about protecting people, they're protecting their future. They're making them homes that they can live in both safety and without sort of financial degradation. And unfortunately, this isn't happening. And so there's just sort of too much, I think, that's just in the wind, that it has not actually been brought under control. And until these parachutes have actually sort of pulled the ripcord, because they're still free falling. Everything is still free falling. So until that ripcord, we need to stop it before and get in there and sort of say, right, this needs to be done. Otherwise, your parachute ain't going to land anywhere.
Silas, I mean, surely, look, I believe some of these large builders have been allotted yet more money and won all these new contracts. So they're very busy. I mean, they can't do everything, can they?
Well, it certainly appears that way, doesn't it? I mean, I think I'm a great believer in the maxim of put yourself in the other person's shoes. And perhaps if the board of these major house builders are so confident in the quality of their building, perhaps they should spend a month working alongside the fire brigade and be tasked with carrying a whole bunch of equipment on their back and then scrambling up 10, 15, 18 flights of stairs in the dark with smoke, with glass raining down upon them, with plastic dripping down the side of a building, and then trying to rescue less able-bodied people out of a building or people that are trapped in that environment. And I think if that was the case, they'd probably think very differently about their current approach to building fire safety, because I certainly wouldn't want to be in that position. And I applaud the boys and girls that are out there dressed in blue that are pulling us out of these buildings when, God forbid, the worst happens. I
mean, once they've disported I mean, I don't want to single out Barrett's, but they are the name on everyone's lips right now. Once they built the building, it's no longer their problem, is it really?
Well, I think there's a responsibility in the quality of the product that's then delivered at the end of it. So we've given the example of an aeroplane falling out of the sky, a vehicle colliding with others on the road because of vehicle safety issues. But when it comes to buildings, we seem to be able to put a shoddy product together, sell it at the highest price possible because there's such shortage of buildings available in the current market, and then not give it two hoots whether or not the value of that collapses overnight because people can't actually sell it, or whether the residents, are unable to get out in the event of a fire. I think it's deeply, deeply disturbing and deeply worrying, and it would be more acceptable, shall we say, if there were isolated incidents of this. But from what I'm seeing from the statistics, this appears to be very much across the board, and it's the cutting of the corners, it's the carelessness of the installation, which should be very carefully managed, it's the poor specification of the products that are being used in the development, and all of these issues are compounding to end up with a situation where poor Steve and his neighbours are in the Royal Artillery Quays, where they are unfortunately living in a building which it leaves very much to be desired from any professional's point of view when it comes to building development.
Well, that brings me straight over to you, sir. Thank you for taking the time out, Steve. I realise that you've actually got a proper job as well as all this. So, look, from what I can understand it, they've agreed to take the cladding off. Isn't that good enough?
Well, I think you need to correct that. So they've agreed to take some of the cladding off, but they're leaving combustible.
To take a portion of the cladding off.
Yes. So
apparently, according to one politician who approved all this slight lessening on the of the directives, it makes it good enough. Is it?
Well, it depends what you call good enough. If you can't sell your flat and you can't insure it, then is that good enough?
Well, some might say that it seems to be good enough for is it Michael Gove? Is that good enough for him? It should be good enough for you.
But Gareth, is it good enough for you? Let's have a conversation. Are you happy not to be able to sell your flat? Are you happy not to be able to insure it for less than $6,000 a year?
It probably make me have far less fruitful, sleepy nights than I do at the moment, certainly. But so what's to be done? I mean, you've been rattling sabers and banging swords for quite a while now. Are we actually getting anywhere? Is anybody taking any notice?
Well, I think it's all about safety. So if we look at the situation with the fire brigade, so Royal Artillery Quays has basically exposed the problem with the remediation standards around the country. Now, the fire chiefs have said in a consultation to the building regulations for approved document B in 2019 that the firefighting shaft should be considered sacrosanct due to the unknown timeline that firefighters will be looking within a building to tackle a fire or an incident. And they later go on and say, therefore, we're of the opinion that a firefighting shaft should be constructed fully of non-combustible materials. Right. Barrett, however, using the standard to completely ignore that advice and leave combustible XPS panels, which are the worst kind of combustible rating, Euro Class E. Now, you would say, well, do they know the risk? Maybe they've taken a view that actually with fire test performance evidence, they're going to ignore the fire chiefs and say it's safe to leave on, which would be a pretty flawed argument anyway. But they don't even have that. They don't know what the test evidence is. They don't know what the product is. So they don't know the risk of leaving it on, and they're ignoring the fire chiefs.
It's a bit nuts. I have to ask, I mean, as far as I know, these XPS panels are effectively mean that this fire shaft is clad in little more than firelighters. Has anyone yet agreed that they are combustible?
Well, XPS is combustible, yeah. There's no doubt that they're combustible, so yeah.
But I mean, and so Barrett's have agreed, yes, they are combustible panels.
Yes, there's no dispute on that. The only dispute that we have is them taking it off. They say it's safe to leave on without any fire test evidence and without knowing what the product is. We say, if you're going to take a risk-based approach, you need to know, given the material is banned on new buildings, so that tells you something about how the government views this material. And given the fire chiefs are screaming out post-Grenfell and post-4 recent fires to take this combustible material off, how can they, without any test evidence to know the risk of retaining it, justify leaving it on? And how can it be that the cost of these panels is just £350,000 versus a £20 million remediation project? How can they justify this? And what they're really saying is, we don't really care too much about our firefighters. We don't care about the National Fire Chief's advice, and we don't need to know the test evidence to see the risk of it. And it's banned on new buildings, but we don't care about leaving on an existing. That's the situation they're in. And, you know, they can say, in our view, it's safe, but the insurers don't buy it. They're refusing to insure B1 graded buildings, which is where the flammable stuff remains on, like our building. Growing numbers, according to Property Mart UK, the largest estate agent body, are declining. It's not just more expensive insurance, it's risking declining the insurance pool, which means some people may not be able to get insurance if their risk appetite isn't there. And then finally, Property Mark is saying these flats are becoming unsellable. What happens if we can't sell our properties after being promised post-remediation that we'll get a remedy? Well, for all of these reasons, Barrett are on the wrong side of this. And we need to protect our fire brigade, our fire crews, and not protect the builders' bottom lines.
Wow. Wendy, in a world where it's becoming ever decreasingly hard for people of any age, I mean, particularly young people, but people of any age, to get a domicile of their own, does that mean we're being forced towards this German-style generation rent?
To be honest with you, although I'm obviously very supportive of people buying their own home, buying a home is not necessarily the right thing for everybody. So it really doesn't matter whether they're a renter or an owner-occupier. Their rights should be exactly the same. So my concern about the fact that these homes are becoming very unsellable is, you know, flats particularly are the predominant stock that first-time buyers tend to buy. So this actually takes quite a lot of homes for first-time buyers out of the market. And it's a real concern that it stagnates the market in these places, particularly, you know, there are so many areas in London, well, not just London, but all over, where they're high density, high-rise blocks of flats. And if people can't buy them, if they can't be sold, then those markets become really stagnant. Silas,
I fear that when we talk about barriers, but they're just the tip of the iceberg. These were unwholesome practices that reportedly are throughout the industry. And so if we now start pointing fingers, we have a potential catastrophe on our hands.
I think we do, Gareth, and interestingly, we were doing some analysis of figures over the course of the last week with regards to the housing market, and it was prompted by somebody suggesting that there were over 1 million housing transactions that took place every year. but that statistic has not been true since pre-2007, other than 2021 when we had the stamp duty holiday. And the point of mentioning all of that is because we've had a declining number of housing transactions taking place every year, so about 30% down in 2023 compared to 2007. We've got 30% less stock going through every year. That automatically, to shoehorn onto Wendy's point there, has an impact on house prices. Now you have all of this stock that is coming to light that actually may be unmortgageable, may be unsellable, may be uninsurable. What then happens to house prices when you start taking all of this stock out? And it has a massive knock-on impact to the point of actually making houses unaffordable and then locking in this generation rent example as you talk about, Gareth. And even worse than that, it's coming at a time when the banks and other institutions are replacing the traditional buy-to-let landlord. So we are likely to become a long-term tenant of a financial institution who, incidentally, is probably not going to have to adhere to the same standards as Joe Blogg's landlord down the road.
But it
And
just
that's a very worrying position.
It just appears to me that even if we find, let's say, the perpetrators from the point of view of people who have passed this and agreed it and so on, will anyone actually feel the pinch from this where it really matters? Won't you just skip to Mexico and set up shop there, or fly off to Buenos Aires or whatever it is?
You know, it's interesting when I look at some of these scandals that have unfolded. I mean, there was one recently where there was, I think it was contaminated blood used in operations, and 50 years later there's an investigation, and there was a problem here, but nobody's held to account. And this is the tragic part of these sorts of things that are unfolding, is you can't tell me that people don't know. So in Steve's example, people know there's a major issue, but everybody's just looking the other way. Well, if we brush it under the carpet, it'll go away, or it'll be somebody else's problem. And morality's gone out of the window, in my humble opinion, and accountability's gone out of the window, in my opinion. And that's why we're in such a bloody big mess. And it's across all professions. And you look at the NHS, you look at banking, you look at medical care, all of these sorts of areas are profit, and life is being sacrificed for profit. And that's a major concern.
Hamish, what to do?
There is something sort of quite interesting, and Steve and I are going to look into this, because we do keep speaking about Barrett as being, if you like, one of those dastardly dogs.
Well, they do appear to be the poster boy of the dastardly dog.
Well, we're looking at that, and I think what's so important about the work is that Steve is doing, and he is getting so much castigation from different areas because of the work that he's trying to do to bring out into the arena exactly what is going on. And the thing is, as we've found ourselves, as we've developed, as we've spoken on a week-to-week basis on these cladding matters, it gets wider and wider. And we sort of bring in Silas, who has, if you like, some knowledge of what went on in the 60s because of his sort of involvement. And we actually sort of, hey, look, this started over 50 years ago. It was probably going on before that, in truth. However, the revelations that we see now, they're in the lights. It's saying distinctly this material is unsafe, or we're not going to guarantee it. And if it's not going to be guaranteed, how the heck can they still keep it on places? But a fascinating thing I actually sort of picked up on was an organisation called Trimble, and they brought out some software called Viewpoint. I'll just read this through you because it was an introduction. What I will do, I will actually put a link so people can actually sort of see from the building industry what can actually be done. And it states here, Marlborough Brickwork, Middlesex Limited, and Aldeco utilised Trimble's Viewpoint Field View and Viewpoint for projects to share, control and collaborate on high-profile projects throughout the UK, mitigating risk and increasing productivity. Now, the stunning thing about this software is not using AI in that one particular sense, but what it is actually doing is collating all of the materials that are actually put into a build project. So it's putting down, it's listing the materials. It is it's actually backing this up with photographs. So the materials are being input into the build. They're actually being photographed. So what you actually have is not the old paperwork sort of trail, which was so important when I go back to my days of working with sort of automotive manufacture. But it's actually using the way we wanted to use IT the right way, and this is being used so effectively. And I love the particular sort of model. So it would actually take away completely anything that's going on. And just sort of briefly, because I don't want us to go on, because it is very interesting. I still have this firm belief: anything that's requires remediating in terms of any of these properties, they should be remediated relative to the current law, not the law was in place in 1960, because things have changed, not the law that was in place in 2002. They should be accountable within the regulations as they stand in 2024. And certainly that is not intended to happen by Barratt's within the Royal Artillery Quays or the majority of other builders who are responsible for the remediation throughout the United Kingdom, not just England and Wales, but Scotland and Ireland as well.
Well, I'm kind of partially glad that AI is not involved in this, although it's quite nice to hear that software is coming to the rescue. I'll stand down on that phone call to Sarah Connor right now. But Skynet notwithstanding, it's good that maybe there is some progress to be made here if we calculate it all. And all the work that you've done, Steve, on trying to change building standards, not just to point the finger at the grubby machinations of Barratt and Co., but also for the future. So I applaud you for that. But once again, guys, it just can open worms everywhere. We've got work to be done to round it all up, Steve.
Well, one thing I'd say is this highlights the attitude of the response. So I've had a legal letter now from the freeholder. And as we're discussing the fire brigade, I thought I'd just read out their attitude to my concerns about the combustible fire shaft.
It's going to make me angry again, isn't it? Go on.
I know that you have quoted an extract from the National Fire Chiefs Council's response to the 2019 consultation of Approved Document B. You have to understand that the government did not take on board the National Fire Chiefs Council comments when drafting Approved Document B. Again, as above, we are all constrained by the current legal and regulatory framework, and I cannot force Barratt to comply with a comment made by the National Fire Chiefs Council, which the government did not put forward into the building safety regulations. In essence, Barratt are on no legal obligation to comply with the comment made in the consultation. And what that means is we agree that Barratt can get away with shafting our fire brigade post-Grenfell, 2 weeks after the Grenfell report. And that's the state we're in now. But the hope is we change the standard.
Well, that letter does which is terrible.
Yeah, basically, you can pee off all your concerns and your combustible fire shaft. You're shafted. Live with it.
Yes, there we go. You see. On that bombshell, I'd like to thank Steve Day for his wordplay and for demonstrating how beautifully and with that lovely condescending tone of voice that a letter can be written with tone in it. Don't believe it can't be. Thank you so much, Hamish McLay, for helping us put this all together. Silas Lees for his wisdom, Wendy Gibson for even more wisdom, and Steve Day for his rather infuriating but quite entertaining letter reading skills, as well as all the work he's done in changing building safety law. Look, there is good stuff on the horizon. We're going to get through this crap first. Thank you everyone for watching. There is more to come. We are pushing forward. I hope, Steve, it comes to a conclusion soon. Although what you're going to do for a major hobby afterwards, I don't know. Maybe you can go back to playing football. But until next week, I thank you all for watching. Try and keep your feet planted firmly on the ground. Make sure you don't cover yourself in XPS. It's not good. and keep reaching for the stars. Until next week, have a lovely weekend. Bye bye.